So the next lot of records I thought I'd look at are to do with schools. Now I've chosen schools because everybody's going to have children in their family tree at some point. So what we have in the record office are admission registers and logbooks and various other sorts of things. But those are the two main types of record. And they survived from the 1860s onwards. Now, schooling did become compulsory, became compulsory in 1880. But it wasn't until 1891 that it became free. And it's really only at that point that practically everybody goes to school. So even though it's compulsory then, parents are still keeping their children off home and sending them out to work instead. The leaving age is very low, it's 10 to start with, goes up to 11, then to 12, and then in 1918 it goes up to 14. Does anybody remember when it went up to 15?
45.
I don't know the answer, actually.
53.
That's taken at random. Well, I think we should all have a look later and find out.
I think after the war.
But anyway, so it did not climb up quite slowly because children were working after that sort of age. So the normal way you find out about children and their ages and everything is from the census, isn't it? So just as a quick example, I'm going to take this little girl here, Mabel Price. She's aged 11 in the 1901 census, and we're going to see what happens to her at school. So she lives on the Doxey Road in the census near Stafford, and I worked out from looking at Ordnance Survey maps, brilliant resource if you're looking at schools, by the way, but the nearest school was this one here, which is St Thomas's in the Castletown area of Stafford. So I then went on to find my cast, which has got the school admission registers, if they're Church of England schools, and up to 1914. And I found Mabel Price, sure enough, at St Thomas's School. And she's on the top line there. It's quite faint, unfortunately. But you've got Mabel Price, you've got the date of admission, which is the 1895, is it? Yeah. Got her father, Samuel Price. And then you've got her address here, you've got the date, that must be date of birth in this column, which can be very useful. Get the previous school, and then you find out their educational attainment. How far did they get? Oh. Well, if you can see, the top one, Mabel Price, she started off in standard 2, and she went up all the way to standard 7. Now, almost all her contemporaries end in standard 6 or lower. So she was obviously a bright girl. And if you look at what happened to her, she left in 1904. And I don't know if you can see that. Appointed monitress, yeah.
Oh.
And has anybody come across that? So somebody being a monitor. It's the first stage, yes, in becoming a pupil teacher. So they start off, so she's only 14, so they start off as what are called pupil teachers. So I thought, well, how can I find out more about that? And so I went to the catalogue again. I looked at the records of St Thomas's School, and I saw that there were some logbooks. So I found the reference number. It's 1904 onwards, just the right year. And sure enough, a list of staff in 1904, Mabel Price, first year. She's listed on the staff, isn't she? She must be so proud at the age of 14. And then in 1908, you can see she's making progress because she's passed the preliminary teaching certificate examination. So logbooks, I don't know if you've seen one, that basically the school teacher, the head teacher's diary, really, of day-to-day events in school. So you can trace the careers of teachers. But you can also find out what school life was like. Now, you know, with family history, it's so tantalising, isn't it? You get these glimpses about what people's lives are, but you don't really have a good understanding of what day-to-day life was like. And logbook's fantastic for that. This is from Prince of Wales School logbook in Rugeley. And I love this one because it had some quite sweet things here. So you've got the first class here making soldiers plum puddings. So this is 1915 November. The first class, so the tiny ones, are making Christmas puddings for the soldiers on Cannock Chase. I hope they were grateful. And standards 5, 6 and 7 were then making plum puddings a bit later on. So I'm assuming that they actually did the difficult bit and the younger children were just sort of a bit of stirring. And then over here, interestingly, you've got standards 5, 6 and 7 are to make 2,000 bomb bags for use of the troops at the camp on Cannock Chase in First World War. I have absolutely no idea what a bomb bag is.
Be a haversack.
Oh, it's up to
It'd be a lean haversack.
be a grenade type.
Put grenades in.
I see. Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's interesting. Well, they had to make 2,000 of them. So that's quite a tall order, I'd say. And then the classes are still making bomb bags in order for. So she's had to suspend lessons basically because the bags are wanted urgently. It's quite a big order, isn't it, to give to school children? They actually made 100 more than they needed to, 2,100. So you can see what the children are doing. You can follow what lessons they've got, you can follow activities, but also you can see what life might have been like generally for people at that time. This one is quite poignant, I think. This is the head teacher speaking. I'm leaving school on the 22nd, so this is 22nd of December 1915, to meet Major Webb from the front on short leave. So this might be the only evidence that she had a lover of some kind. He might have been killed the next year.
When teachers are not allowed to marry in those days.
No, she's single at this stage, yeah. So she might have had to leave afterwards. But during the First World War, there was a shortage of teachers, of course, because of the men at the front. And so you did get married women teachers during the First World War. So lots of interesting things there about school life.
Are these logbooks produced today?
Well, I used to be a teacher, funnily enough, and when I was teaching, the head teacher did, so this is up to 2000, there was still a logbook being kept at the high school I was working at. But I don't know whether they still do. I don't think they do. I mean, they just wouldn't, would they? Unless they like the tradition, because everything's so, you know.
In the 60s, I know we kept record books, but that was mainly to do with subjects that you were covering that week. I don't remember actually referring to anything personal about staff or children.
No, it wouldn't, I don't think. But the this was the head teacher's responsibility.
But it, you know, they were handwritten.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, they would be, wouldn't they?
This is another admission register. That's the school I've just shown you. And I think this one is quite interesting because you see, you've got the exact date of birth for these children here. Now, how many times have you been looking for somebody on the 1939 register? You think, if I only had an exact date of birth, I could find that person with the surname Smith. But without that exact date of birth, it's quite difficult, isn't it? So that can be quite useful. But the other interesting thing is where these children are coming from to Rugeley in the First World War. You've got Ripley, Yorkshire, Middlesbrough, Doncaster, Darlington.
All mining areas.
Exactly right, yes, yeah. And they don't stay long either. They leave, a lot of them leave the town and go elsewhere. And I'm wondering if what's happening is Rugeley is kind of like a muster point for people coming down. They stay for a short time and then they move out to different mines and get taken on, and then they're probably not far away, but they're not actually in Rugeley. So what have we got for Chasetown? I'm just going to take you through the catalogue here. So when you click on advanced search on the catalogue, and say you put in Chasetown and chose, it's a bit pompous, but educational institutions. I don't know why they couldn't have schools. I think it's because there are colleges as well. So Chasetown, collection type educational institutions. And that takes you to this, records of Chasetown Primary School and its predecessors, including the Cannock Chase Colliery Schools. And it tells you the covering dates of the records. They start in 1864, so it's quite an early one. We go right through almost to the present day. you click on that underlined title, and that takes you to this fuller description. It tells you what sort of records there are, and it tells you about the history of the school. You can see there's quite a lot of stuff. So you've got 4 boxes of material as well as 14 volumes, a lot of material. And then you click on that underlined text again, and you get somewhere where you can begin to browse the catalogue and see in detail what there is. So there are logbooks, admission registers. I opened up the admission registers to see how many there were, and this is one of those admission books. So I looked at the catalogue, clicked on this one here. It opened up a description, and I found this admission register. And this one is quite interesting actually, because it's in the 1930s and 40s, and it's got a lot of children from Margate who were admitted in 1940. Presumably
Evacuated.
evacuees, yeah. And then later on it records some of them actually going back home to Margate. Either the parents wanted them back, or the president, but or they, they decided the danger wasn't so great. So that's how you go through the catalogue to find what other records there are. Now, we've only got a few minutes left, and what I think I'll do now is just take, if it's okay with you, just take you through quite quickly what other kinds of records you might find in the record office. Okay? So apologies if this is a bit quick, I'm going to skip some of it. So I mentioned hospitals, yeah? So this is a picture of St Matthew's in circa 1910. It opened in 1864. For each of those 3 hospitals, what the former county asylums, we've got case books that look like this. They're very hefty, so I didn't bring one with me, I'm afraid. And they give you all sorts of information about patients. Now, I mentioned there's an index. So I looked for a lady called Frances Jones. Jones is not an unusual surname, but Frances luckily is. And it told me she was admitted to Burntwood in 1905 and that she was a housewife. I then went to the casebook and I found out some information about her, but also a photo. You'll find that the poorer and the more criminal or the more ill your ancestors are, the more likely you are to find a photograph. Or any information at all, actually. So this tells you a lot of background information about her family. Tells you the number of children she had, tells you 14 children. It tells you that 6 of them died in infancy. So she's had a hard life. And it's not surprising that she's suffering from what they're calling melancholia, which is essentially depression. They put down the cause as change of life, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's 6 children dying didn't have something to do with it as well.
Yeah.
And you can see it reports her actual speech. So she says that she's feeling absolutely miserable. Sorry, I always seem to pick on the worst, most depressing kind of records, and I give it all. And it says later that she has a weak heart. However, she is discharged in 1919, apparently relieved. It doesn't say recovered though. So relieved simply means that she's stable enough to go home. So that Staffordshire name index is where you'd pick up if you had an ancestor in one of the Staffordshire hospitals. So moving on to criminal records, not time casting any aspersions whatsoever, but there are 3 layers of courts in Staffordshire. The ones that we have the most information for are the Quarter Sessions. And this is an example of one of the what they call calendars of prisoners. And again, these are all indexed on the Staffordshire Name Index's website from the late 18th century right through to the early 20th century. So if you had somebody who was a criminal in your ancestry in Staffordshire in the 19th century, you're likely to pick them up. So I was following a case of Henry Chester's. Now, Henry Chester's was brought up before the magistrates for stealing 2 fowls. And he was with 2 other people, but it was said Henry Chester's who was found guilty and he was to be transported for 7 years.
Oh.
The other two were found not guilty.
Australia, yeah.
So we head over the page. I then use the catalogue to find the witness statements in the case. And you have to bear in mind that this chap was actually transported, so it was serious, but I'm afraid this one made me laugh. So the three men who were accused of stealing the fowls made a great noise with cursing and swearing, and they tumbled William Shaw, the son of the person they stole from, and threw him into some water. Now, this is the witness statement of the wife of the victim. And she said her husband was a little in liquor. Now, I'm wondering, had they all been drinking at the pub together? He'd been drinking a little rum, apparently. And they said they saw Henry Chester's with a fowl in his hand, so caught red-handed. I love this bit. She said she had no doubt that the fowls now produced in the court were the fowls she saw on the roost the night before. She's known them since they were hatched. Great. And the pullet was a favourite of her husband's, just to, egg the pudding. So, but on this evidence, and there is only one witness statement in the court bundle, this man was transported for 7 years. I suspect the other two accused probably supported this witness statement, and that's why. But harsh. Very harsh. But these make such interesting reading. They don't tell you much more about Henry Chester's, but it's just one incident in his life that had so much effect. So if your family were arrested, and it's from about the 1870s onwards, you might find their photograph as a prisoner. Now, each prisoner had to hold their hands like this and stare straight at the camera, apart from this lady, Caroline Pulley, apparently, who had obviously had enough. She was a serial offender of stealing coals. We can only guess at why. But this is a report on Stafford Prison from the prison reformer. I can't remember which one it was now, sorry. Anyway, somebody wrote a report on the prison, and he was talking about the prisoners being chained with only 14 inches between them, and that the moisture from their breath was running down the walls of the prison. So Stafford Prison was not a nice place to be locked up. And they also had child prisoners. And you can see from these statistics, I'm sorry it's a bit blurred, that at the time this report was taken in 1852, that there were 7 children under the age of 10 years in Stafford Prison.
Oh.
And then 178 between 10 and 15. And then it increases up to 25, and then it begins to decrease after that. But how old do you think they are, those two? What do you think? Harriet Raby on the left. Any thoughts?
16.
15.
She's 15. Yeah. This one here? 11. Right. Well done. Yeah. But he looks tiny, doesn't he? He looks very young, doesn't he? Yeah.
He looks like my grandson. When did the criminology evolve to it?
I'm not sure about that, sorry. 20th century, I think. Again, these are all listed on the Staffordshire Name Indexes. So those court registers and the prisoner albums, they're all indexed online. And then we've also got the admission and discharge registers for Stafford Prison. So this is the census entry for Stafford Prison in 1901, I think. And then I looked up the prison register for those people listed in the census and found all of them. And it's very interesting to see that most of them are for neglect of children or for stealing. Those are the two main crimes that women seem to be incarcerated for. And you can see that a lot of it, the sentences are really quite short, just a couple of months at a time. And that's because so many people are going into the prison. they're quite harsh but short sentences. So that's 2 months hard labour. So it's not just, 2 months in prison, it's sort of, hard labour. So that might be operating a treadmill, for example, or for women doing hard work in the laundry, prison laundry. If you're not depressed enough already, we have workhouse records as well. And again, the admission and discharge registers are the key ones. I'll just run through this quite swiftly. Again, they're indexed on Staffordshire name indexes, so you can look up your ancestors to see if they're in the workhouse. And this is a typical workhouse register. So this is the people admitted in, I think it's 1841, that's right. And if you look at the reasons, pregnant, sickness, as a child with a mother, pregnant, child with a mother, sickness and lameness.
Have you got those for Lichfield?
We have, but for Lichfield, they don't survive well. I'll come back to that in a sec. So, what you'll see is that a lot of people are in the workhouse for a very short period of time. There's a quick turnover. People didn't want to be in there any longer than they had to be. And people went there if they're desperate. So very often it's unmarried mothers needing somewhere to give birth to a child, or it's somebody that's sick and unable to work and has got no other means of support. So again, those are listed on the name index. So Lichfield, Burntwood Workhouse, for Burntwood, the local workhouse is Lichfield. You can see that on the Ordnance Survey map. And this is Lichfield Union Workhouse in 1901, long list of people. Could only find one from Burntwood, interestingly. And he's aged 81, a widower. And there is an admission register for that date, but that is the only one. It only covers a couple of years. There are other documents for Lichfield, though. Things like this, which is the poor. So the workhouses were run by poor law guardians. And this is an example of one of their minute books. And this tells you sort of like little case summaries. So it tells you a person's name and whether they went into the workhouse or not. So this one, James Steele, is a bastard child, excuse my language, age 6, and lives with a Thomas Bagnall, who's no relation. He had a mother who is married and lives in Ireland's Cross near War, but it's clearly not taking responsibility for the child. So he's to be given relief in the poorhouse. So he's taken into the workhouse. Whereas this lady up here, Dorothy Hawkswood, she's a spinster, age 57, and she's a lunar idiot, it says, and lame, and lives with Theodosia Brooks. And she's getting £4 of bread and 1 6 a week. So they obviously think that she's, well looked after there, and she'll get an allowance outside of the workhouse.
That's exactly is that 1838?
Yes.
It's exactly the period when William Hill, my 5-time grandfather, was relieving officer.
Oh, right, that's interesting. However,
he worked for Mr. Diet at Freeford Hall. He was the chairman of the Guardians.
Yeah, right, good. And then you also get lists of apprentices who are apprenticed out by the guardians. So that gives you details that this child is deserted, for example. This child, the father is dead. This one is an orphan. And so they're apprenticed out at the age of 8 years. We've got records of Staffordshire Police. Again, these are indexed. You get the personal details of all the policemen that sign up. So this one is appointed in 1914, Thomas Hill. He's come all the way from Queensland, Australia, to actually join Staffordshire Police, or that's where he's born. And he is pensioned out in 1946.
Probably convict coming back.
Interesting, be good to trace him. You get police discipline registers as well. So this one, for example, is a policeman called George. I've lost his surname over there. Anyway, disgraceful conduct in having connections with a prostitute in a churchyard close to a public street.
Oh,
Shocking.
Oh,
So he is actually dismissed. Most of the police disciplinary things are to do with drink, though, under the influence of drink is very common. Indecent behaviour, neglect of duty, drunkenness, drunk and absent. So-
there's a robbery down there.
Yes, you're right, yes. Oh. Permitting, no.
omitting.
To report a robbery.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, these police disciplinary, registers are indexed as well. So you've got somebody in the police force, you'll find them listed. If they've been naughty in the police force, you find them listed on the name indexes.